Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I am your host, Stephen Peinecker, but as you can see, this is not a Mormon Book Reviews episode. This is a special MMR episode. When you see that in the corner, it means Mormon Media Reviews and typically means Rebecca Biblioteca is in the house as the co-hostess with the mostest. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I am so excited about this interview. This has kind of been on my bucket list. So very excited.
And I figured, okay, I bought this last year for my Halloween episode, and I thought this would be, I need to wear this shirt because I don't have any other episodes that would be appropriate, because we have in the house the fresh King Benjamin, Ben Brown. Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, meet Mormon Media Reviews.
Oh my God, Stephen and Rebecca, I am so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's see. Actually, I think this is perfect. Oh, before we get started, folks, of course, we have to do the important thing, and that is to remember that this month's book drawing is a preparatory redemption, reading Alma 12 through 13. Bridget Jack Jeffries submitted a paper. She's an evangelical, and she wrote a paper called and Ordained, a Priesthood of All Believers in Alma 13, which shows that the Book of Mormon teaches traditional Protestant doctrine regarding the priesthood. And it is this month's book giveaway. So in the description, there will be a place for my email. Make sure you put in the subject line, July/August book drawing, and make sure you give me your name and address in there. And also, just real quick, okay, so we all are just kind of reeling from our time spent in Sunstone. I spent a week in Utah, and it was awesome. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, folks, the Clearwater St. Pete Airport direct flight to Provo, Utah is a revelation. No more. It's awesome. So I have a feeling that I'm going to be able to get out to Utah a lot more frequently as a result. And one of the reasons I was there, of course, was I had to do the annual kickball tournament between the polygamists and the ex-Mormons, or the ex-Mos and Funmos. And this year, for the very first time, Team Outer Darkness defeated Team Higher Law 15-6. So this, for those of you who didn't know, and so it was a great time had by all. And before we get started, because Ben, you got this fantastic program coming up that we want to share with the audience, but I thought since we all attended Sunstone, Rebecca, what did you think of it? It was pretty awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing. I've always wanted to go, and something has always come up. It's the end of summer. But this was my first time, and I went to the entire thing from Thursday night all the way through the final picnic. It was just amazing. To me, it was just so fun to see people that are kind of your heroes, heroines, right? Podcasters and scholars, and to be able to actually just get up close and personal and have a conversation and a dialogue. And I was really stunned and amazed that, I have my own little podcast, Mormonish, with Landon Brophy. He was there with me, and that people even came up to us and gave us some feedback on what we were doing. And it was just incredible. It was wonderful, just to see that, oh, people are actually watching. That's amazing. So all around, it was just wonderful. And the information and the scholarship and just the fun, like everybody is so friendly, laughing, talking, synergizing, learning. It was just a supercharged, energetic environment, and it was really wonderful.
It really was. And I have to say, I had my own personal Uber. Swanee, thank you for giving me a ride. And actually, I got to drive the Tesla. I got to drive the Tesla while I was there, which was so cool. And I had people open up their homes. I ended up staying at one person's home one night because, to be honest with you folks, a lot of money came in to help support my trip, which was a real blessing. So I was able to stay at hotels, and I want to thank everybody who offered their homes to me. I want to also thank, this is weird because, there are about 1,500 to 2,000 people at the Sunstone this year, from my understanding. And I would say a large percentage of those people knew who I was this time. And it was really surreal when people would walk up to me and say, boy, you're a lot taller than I realized. Or they just start telling me about their favorite episode that they watched, or how much they appreciate me and we're excited. And I'm like, it was kind of weird because it happened a little bit at Sunstone, but it was on steroids this year. And I just want to thank everybody for all the kind words. Oh my goodness. I love all of you. And then I for the first time, got recognized in public a few times while I was out there. So it's kind of crazy to see where this has all gone. And I feel really privileged to be able to do this. And I feel really privileged to have on Ben, because last year we met at Sunstone for the first time.
Sunstone, that was my first Sunstone.
And what was so crazy is you have these two different audiences. You have the TikTok people, the TikTok producers, the content producers, And you have the YouTube content producers, and very rarely do our worlds collide. It wasn't until people came to me last year and said, "Oh, he's really big on TikTok." Like, oh, okay, well, let me meet this guy who's really big on TikTok, and you get to meet me, and we didn't know really each other. And it's kind of cool just to be able to see our worlds kind of collide and everything like that way. But I wanted to ask you, Ben, what did you think of Sunstone? You said last year was your first year, so tell us about what your two experiences at Sunstone and how it went.
Yeah, so I really love Sunstone because for me, a lot of my kind of alternative Mormon journey has been done alone. And so it was really cool last year to realize that there was a really wide community of people who are at some level of somewhere in something with Mormonism, and that just has a lot of space for people to kind of come and be themselves wherever themselves happen to be, right? So that felt really nice for me. And then this year was just a lot of fun because I got to kind of take that community and sort of add to it. So I did a session on finding the funny in your Mormon story, where I got a bunch of people together and we all basically wrote I had everyone write a little like 1-minute stand-up sketch about their Mormon story and present it to each other. And it was really cathartic, and it was really healing, and it was really funny. So I'm just really grateful to everyone at Sunstone who has done, a lot of work behind the scenes, and I'm sure a lot of it unappreciated and underpaid, to create a community that's really important for the Mormon culture.
Absolutely, and just an awesome job, Lindsay and the crew. Just a fantastic job. As we're going to have Gene Judson come back on and give his annual report of Sunstone, like we did last year, and he's one of the key volunteers there this year. And so we're going to talk about that. So thanks again for everybody. Thanks for Sunstone for helping bring us all together. This is really awesome. And Ben, I think it's really important that you people get some context about who you are and your background, because I got to hear your set last year at Sunstone. I've heard a little bit about your story, because honestly, you come from, when you say an alternative type of Mormonism, you come from a pretty extreme background and a pretty dark childhood.
Yeah,
And
I come from what I call the 7th layer of Mormon hell.
okay.
And the way that I would describe that is that I grew up in sort of one of the focal points of division in the Mormon worldview. So it's funny that you bring up the kickball game, because there's this sort of war between like the Ex-Mos and the Fundies. And that really is sort of the focal point that I'm born into. My family has been Mormon since 1835. So for almost 200 years, this has been my family's culture. This has been my family's religion. This has been my family's worldview. And for most of that time, my family has been a member of the LDS version of Mormonism, right? So I know that the audience that you kind of cater to is sort of diverse. And so I want to be really respectful in how I speak about, because I'm not trying to push anyone away here, but I am trying to authentically share the experience that I've had, right, in this kind of collective worldview that we all share. And so for me, my family had been part of the LDS tradition up until right before I was born. And right before I was born, my dad and several members of his family, so like his parents and several of his siblings, they became converted to a polygamist sect of Mormonism, one called the Apostolic United Brethren, or the AUB. People also know of it as the All Red Group, or I think right now it's led by a guy named Dave Watson. So it's like the FLDS, but maybe a little bit more mainstream. Which again is a very, like, when I say that, that's a very long spectrum. And so that's still very far away from actual mainstream, but they don't usually wear like the funky clothes or the kind of swooped hair. So my dad and his family decide to join that. And at the time that they do, my dad is kind of courting this other woman who's Mormon. She's a widow, and she becomes converted as well. And they pray, and they feel like they're supposed to wait to get married until they find a second wife. They feel like they're supposed to enter the principle of plural marriage kind of together as a family at one time. And so they come down to Utah and they go to college. And my dad, he attends like a local singles ward, because at this point he's still a member of the LDS church. So he's kind of joined this AUB sect, but he's still a member of the LDS. And it's important to understand the way that a lot of the way a lot of people in sort of more in the fundamentalist sects view the relationship with the LDS Church, because most of them don't view the LDS Church as they would say that the LDS Church is the one true church, that is God's restored church. They feel like they're sort of like this part of it that got sort of excised and taken out, and that they're the governing part. So they're what's called the priesthood. And they say that the priesthood was removed from the church, and that the church is still kind of doing what it's supposed to do, which is to bring the Book of Mormon to the entire world. And they're kind of in charge. The priesthood is now in charge of keeping the higher laws protected, right? And so for me, what that looked like is that I was raised in a version of Mormonism that was sort of the version, it had sort of taken up a lot of the parts of Mormonism that the LDS Church has jettisoned, right? So the LDS Church has really stepped far away from a lot of the racist ideologies that it purported even just 40 or 50 years ago. It's tried to distance itself from that. My family sect, they're like still totally in on that, right? Like they love quoting Brigham Young when he says things like, the only way for a man to be saved after he, mixes his seed with the seed of Canaan is for him to be killed on the spot, right? I heard that constantly growing up. And so they come down to college and they meet my mom. My mom is an LDS girl. She's pretty young. She's just at college, and they convert her, and she joins the polygamist group with them, and they all get married. And then that creates this massive split in my family, because my mom's parents are hardcore LDS, right? They are very dedicated members of the LDS faith, and they still are today. And their daughter has just essentially committed the worst crime that a Mormon daughter could, which is, it would be better if she had left the church, right? Like leaving the church and becoming an apostate is not nearly as grievous a sin to a good Mormon family in the 80s than joining a polygamist sect. Like that's the worst thing that she could do. And so she's ostracized. My grandparents go to great lengths. My maternal grandparents go to great lengths to ensure that all of my father's family who were LDS and have joined the polygamist sect are excommunicated. They even go so far as to like drive up to Wyoming hundreds of miles to participate in my grandfather's excommunication trial. And into that very happy family, I'm born.
Lucky you.
Lucky me. And I'm born, and I get raised on this very small ranch in Wyoming that was the family's ranch. And it'd been in the family for several generations. So my parents had been, my father's family had been LDS for a long time. And so they'd been sent up to Wyoming to kind of do a homestead thing, like when Brigham Young was doing that stuff. And so we had kind of a ranch that'd been in the family for a while. And we kind of turned that into what I call now a compound. We didn't use that language, right? What we called it was the promised land, where the righteous will flee to in the time of trouble. So we believed that the end times were like right around the corner, and that we needed to keep this ranch safe and to acquire as much land for this ranch as possible, so that when the world ended, the righteous people would have a place of refuge to flee to, right? And if you can imagine the kind of, I don't know, anxiety that might be created in the mind of a child when you tell them that not only is the world ending very soon, but you're really important in making sure that everyone who's righteous is safe when the world ends. And how can you do that, 8-year-old child who isn't going to school right now? Well, what you can do is you can come and work in our family's bakery, which is how we monetarily support the ranch and acquiring the land. So if you come and work in this bakery with us, then you're doing your part to further the kingdom of God. And so that's what I did from when I was 8 until I was about 18 when I left. So for 10 years, I didn't attend school. I just worked in my family's bakery. We were homeschooled, but that kind of like sometimes we did some stuff and sometimes we didn't. My math education basically consisted of my mom handing me an Algebra 2 textbook and saying, here, go learn Algebra 2, which I did because I actually learned what I think is the most important lesson about Algebra 2. And it's that the answers are in the back of the book. And
You're a smart kid.
I've used that trick more times than I've ever used Algebra 2 as an adult. And so, yeah, so then to kind of condense maybe the story a little bit so we can get into, so I'd love to answer any questions you have, or we can kind of go wherever you want to go. When I'm 17 or 18, my parents decide that it's time for me to go to college, not because they have an ambition of sending all of their kids to college, but because they feel like I have a sort of a special destiny. So they told me that I had kind of this special destiny to go and become a lawyer and to protect not only the polygamous people from the encroachments of the evil government, but that I would also help save America when the Constitution was hanging by a thread in the last days. So I'd get to do that too, which would be rad. And then I was also, when I was right around that same time, I was also given a patriarchal blessing from the patriarch of the AUB. And he told me that I had been chosen to be the one who would unite the church and the priesthood again. So that was my destiny. So then I get kind of sent out into the world, and I go to college, and I'm interacting for kind of the first time with people who are sort of regular Mormon, kind of just mainstream LDS Mormon. And I start to have little cracks, right? I start to see.
Where did you go? Where did you go to college?
I went to a small alt-right, like conservative college in St. George, or in Southern Utah, in Cedar City, called George Wythe University.
Okay.
It's since gone defunct. It was like a very small kind of experimental college that was really dedicated. They kind of really leaned hard into the Save America thing.
Okay.
And so I was there. I actually completed a degree there. I was there for 4 years. And yeah, while I'm there, I'm doing a lot of reading. So I'm reading, it's a liberal arts degree. And so I'm reading a lot of philosophy. I'm reading a lot of history. I'm learning a lot about the world and my place in it. Right. And I'm starting to feel like the worldview that I had is very small. That it actually can't really contain all of this world that I'm experiencing. And I'm also finding that I can't relate to the world that I'm experiencing the way that feels authentic to me because of the constraints that I feel in this worldview. And one of those constraints was the racism. So I was raised to be a white supremacist, right? I was told that even a drop of black blood would render someone unable of, unworthy of holding the priesthood, and that would basically stunt their eternal progression. You can't, because without the priesthood, you can't go to the temple, and without going to the temple, you can't actually go to the celestial kingdom. So the best you could hope for is terrestrial kingdom, right? That's a really yucky thing to believe, right? It felt really yucky to believe that, and to feel like I had to I kind of had to choose between what I had been taught was true and what felt good in my body, right? Because my little body knew from the time I was like 5 that this racism thing I didn't even have that word for it, right? And as a 5-year-old, no one was telling me, hey, this is racism and this is what it looks like, right? So I didn't even have that concept, but there was something about that just, I can still feel it, right? When I think about that, I can still feel it in my belly. It feels disconnected. It feels gross. It feels bad. And that feeling is kind of being contradicted against this other feeling up here, right? Of this truth that's been revealed. And so I feel a lot of tension there. And I end up going to do a summer in Uganda. So I get this really awesome opportunity to go over and teach like classes to teachers of high schools and elementary schools over in Uganda, which to me is still hilarious because I had never been to a school. And so I get over there, and I'm the only white, like I'm one of like 5 white people for literally hundreds of miles, right? I'm the minority now. And I'm just surrounded by the I make these really great friends. I meet these really amazing people. I get adopted into a clan and given like an African name. And so I have all of these really cool experiences with these people that I've been told are not as good as me. Right? It's not that they're bad people necessarily. That's not what they say, but they're just not as worthy and righteous and clean as me. And that I couldn't square that thing. And so I come back and I'm kind of in this space of not really knowing. And eventually I decide to join the LDS church. I joined the LDS church. I marry this really this Mormon girl that I'd met at college, and we start a family right away because that's what you do when you are a righteous LDS church member. And we have 3 kids in pretty rapid succession. And at one point, this is kind of where I have an experience where I begin to realize that my experience of Mormonism, my conception of Mormonism as a factual thing that is real in this world, is not actually the case. Because I get after the birth of my second son, I get really sick. I get the flu for about a week. I struggled to keep water down, and then I get severely dehydrated, and I end up kind of in like convulsing and spasming. And what I need is water, and what everyone around me thinks is happening is that I have a devil. And so they call the bishop, and the bishop calls the stake president, and the stake president, I go to the bishop's house, and the stake president and the bishop use their priesthood authority to try and cast the devil out of me.
Now, is this mainstream LDS at this point?
This is mainstream LDS at this point. This is at a ward in like in Happy Valley.
Okay.
And it doesn't work, obviously. I continue to go down until I'm eventually taken to a hospital, and they pump me up with water, and then I start to recover. And so that moment for me is shattering, because even when I'd gone from polygamist Mormon to LDS Mormon, there had still been this overarching kind of like bubble that I lived in, which is Mormonism is true, right? And when I say Mormonism is true, I think we all kind of know what that means, right? What that means that Joseph Smith really saw the things that he claimed to see, and that the church that he established really is the God's true church, and that it is led by God's prophet, right? And so that you can rely on that that's something that you can build your life against. And for me, I built my life against that. And when I needed it, it wasn't there. And because it would have been so easy, if everything that is said is true, it would have been so easy for the Holy Ghost to whisper to these righteous priesthood holders who are trying to cast the devil out of me, hey, just give the kid some water. Like give him a soda, give him something with a straw, right? And so that kind of puts me in this funky place where I'm kind of start to deconstruct, and I kind of start to think about, well, maybe the church isn't true, but maybe it's still good, right? I think right around that time I think Eugene, isn't there a Eugene, somebody who wrote
Eugene England, probably?
Eugene England, yeah. So I read his thing, and I was like, oh, I like this, right? I like this because then I don't have to abandon my community. Then I don't have to abandon my family, because even at this point, right, like my entire extended family for hundreds of years is Mormon, right? So I can just kind of exist in that world, and I can find a way for it to be good. And so I become very nuanced, right? I become like Bible stories are myths, but that's great because we can, like, myths are cool. We can learn stuff from them. I'm very open, but that kind of softness that then opens me up to seeing things about the current church policy and structure and culture that I find problematic, right? Because I'm now no longer ceding that as my authority. I'm the authority, and I'm going to navigate it that way. And the thing that really starts to bug me is the way that the church treats women. Because I as in some kind of weird fluke, I think most polygamous boys, there's a very kind of a strong gender, sort of, you get gendered pretty quick. So the boys go off and work with the men and the girls go off and work with the girls, right? And I ended up working with the girls because I ended up working in the bakery. And so I kind of got into this. I was hardly ever around the young men or men when I was growing up. I was almost always surrounded by my sisters, my cousins, my moms, my aunts. And I'd listen, I'd hear what their experience was like, right? They'd be talking about what their experience was like, and I'd absorb that. And so as I'm starting to kind of enter this more critical sort of, kind of like, this more critical phase of like actually looking at the world that I'm in and saying, no, this isn't right. And this isn't right. I see the way that the LDS church is systematically and structurally treating women, right? In terms of like, are they nice to women, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that the opportunities for women to have and express power in the church are just as limited as they are in the polygamist groups, right? And that the only real difference is that the men in the LDS church are of their own volition treating the women better or giving the women more voice or but functionally, right? If you look at the actual structure, women don't have priesthood, men have priesthood. And that means that men don't have to listen to what women have to say. And I'm not saying that that's how all Mormon men are, because I know a lot of Mormon men who go out of their way to do that, right? So I want to give like a lot of props to them because they're working against a overwhelming culture that can be pretty hard. But they're the only reason that's leadership roulette, right? That's not a good system. That's a system that is just begging to be abused. And so I see that, and I'm like, well, and then right around that time, Kate Kelly comes on the scene, and she's like, let's give the women priesthood. And I'm like, yes, 100% yes. And at the very least, we should, like, we have a prophet, right? We claim to have a prophet who speaks directly to God. This is one of those questions we should be asking. And we should do that immediately. No question in my mind. And she says it, and there's nothing. And then she goes and she does the action at Temple Square, and there's nothing. And then she does it again, and there's nothing. And she does it again, and they're like, we're going to excommunicate you. And when they do that, they also say, and we're going to excommunicate John Dehlin. And I'm like, who's this John Dehlin guy? And I Google John Dehlin.
Okay.
And then I find Mormon stories. And then I'm like, and then I get into that, and I realize, oh, I've been horrifically lied to. I have had the stories that I have been told about what this organization is and where it's came from are so not what it really is. And for me, the biggest sort of break for me that kind of felt like the moment where I was like, I cannot do this anymore, was when the church published their essay on polygamy in Kirtland and Nauvoo, right? And that's the one where they finally, after 200 years,
this would be the gospel topics essays,
where they finally admit that Joseph Smith did what we put Warren Jeffs in jail for doing, which is he married a 14-year-old girl, and he used his religious authority to pressure that into happening. I was never told that. I was told growing up that that was a lie. And that's not a lie, it's true. And I learned that, and then I read how they describe it. And the way that they describe it is they say Joseph Smith, or Helen Mar Kimball, the youngest of these was Helen Mar Kimball, who married Joseph Smith several months before her 15th birthday. And I read that sentence, and I realized for myself that the organization that could respond to a leader's pedophilia in that way is not a safe or responsible organization, and I can have no part of it. And so I decided to resign my membership.
Okay, well, that's what a fascinating story, and thank you for giving us some background here. And of course, I sat in on your comedy set last year at Sunstone, and Rebecca, I want you to step in here any second too. And it was a very I look at it this way. And by the way, folks, I did interview Liz Phillips on my show, who gives the history of AUB as well as Merlin Allred. And I'm going to leave a link at the end of the video here so you could check that out, because it's a fascinating story about the AUB. But you basically experienced, fundamentalist Mormonism growing up, and then you went into mainstream Mormonism. And in your personal story that you've experienced, there was a lot of abuse that was going on, especially in your childhood. You were deprived of a proper education. This is a tragic story in so many ways, but one of the ways that we deal with tragedy is through comedy.
Yeah.
And maybe talk about how you led into that.
Yeah. So there's this really cool moment on my journey. After I leave and I resign my membership, then I kind of go into this phase of sort of being really honest about what had happened to me, and then doing the work to heal. So I have to then acknowledge, oh, I was labor trafficked. Oh, I like all of these things that I kind of like thought were just normal weren't, and I've got to deal with that. Right. So I Google like trauma therapist in my area and I find the first one, and I go and I see her, and she's great. And so I go on this, and I'm like healing and stuff. And the first song I start expressing. And I remember when I was a kid, I loved the guitar, right? My dad had a guitar, and I would sometimes look at it for hours. I had no idea how to play it, but I wanted to, right? And so I got myself a guitar, I got myself a guitar teacher, and I just started like writing stupid, like whatever I wanted to do. And I wrote a song, and I actually played it. This is one of the songs I played at the show that Rebecca caught. I wrote a song that's very sad. It's kind of a very sad expression of what I was feeling and how it felt to be neglected and mistreated and just kind of ignored. And then after I wrote that song, then I wrote another song that's just stupid and silly. And I realized that I had some sadness in me that I had to get out authentically, but that my life was never going to be a tragedy, because my life is a comedy. And for me, what that means is that comedy isn't about making fun of bad things that have happened, although it can be, right? You can make fun of those things. But what it's really about is it's about transcending the bad things that have happened. It's about transcending suffering. It's about, if you can laugh at something, it means it doesn't have power over you anymore, right? You can sort of get up and above it. So if that's an experience, right? I got to tell you guys, right? Like, it sucks to be labor trafficked. That's not a cool thing. It sucks less to be labor trafficked when I can make a really funny joke about labor trafficking and get an entire room full of people to laugh about it with me, right? Because suddenly I'm not alone in that suffering anymore. Suddenly I'm able to kind of take this thing, and maybe it's a thing, if I've done it well, maybe it's a thing that everyone sort of feels like. So maybe it's not really a joke about labor trafficking. Maybe it's a joke about being mistreated. Maybe it's a joke about how it feels to not be taken care of by the people who should take care of you. And if I can find something funny about that, then suddenly all of us are now laughing about something that is rightly painful.
Wow, Rebecca, why don't you chime in here?
Yeah, I'm just resonating so much with your story. I was obviously not raised in a fundamentalist fashion, but I was raised very orthodoxly by parents who were, Orthodox and Bircher Society and Skousen and all of that. So when you say labor trafficked, I was sent to the church welfare farm every Saturday of my young teenage life from 4 a.m. on all day. So I relate to all of this. And I think you and I relate on the level that, yes, I have always sort of been known for telling funny stories about these kind of situations. And you're absolutely right. We were talking before we started airing that I even got the chance sort of ad hoc to do a 20-minute comedy set connected to something my son was doing. And it just kind of came spilling out, all these stories, and people were exactly what you said, horrified if they were never Mormons, shaking their head, relating and laughing if they were Mormons. But, it was still an overall positive experience as you get that out and talk about these things. And as you mentioned, I did have a chance a couple months ago to see you in your incredible set at Wiseguys. It was a packed house. Like, we got there early and it was already packed. I was with a group from the Good Book Club and also Mormonish podcast, and we just sat there, and it was wonderful. It was just an excellent show. And he delved into all these stories from his childhood, but made them extremely accessible. All of us could relate to some part of it on some level, whether we worked in a church welfare farm and could relate to his bakery, or just relate to, some kind of mistreatment that you didn't understand until later was something that maybe should not have happened when you were growing up. So it was very healing and very, I don't want to make it sound like it was a downer. It was hilarious.
To be clear, yeah, we laughed a lot.
Yes. The house was rocking. Like, it was packed and rocking. And I'm so excited to hear that you're doing it again, which we'll talk about later. But I love how at the end, Steve, I don't know if you know, he brought out his guitar and he started to sing some of these songs that he had written, which had a little more of a serious flavor to some of them, but it was just such a perfect mix of the comedy and then some of these more introspective musical numbers. And what I noticed is that after it let out, like, everybody wanted to stay and talk. Things that you had said, we were talking in groups about it. Oh, that happened to me. I can relate to that. Or this happened. People started sharing their own stories, at least in the group I was in. And you could just hear a conversation everywhere. So I love that you're a conversation starter, and you had the musical element to part of it. I guess long way around with my question, I'm wondering about, does your family understand what you do and how you're helping people? Or is there, if you're comfortable talking about that dynamic, because you're doing a great work. You really are. You're letting people who may not even know that they have a trauma or understand how to open up through your comedy. They can start to dig in and access it, which is wonderful. So what does your family think?
Oh my gosh. First, I just have to say thank you, Rebecca, so much for all those lovely things that you just said. I feel like so special and so seen by you, because you've really kind of captured the thing that I'm trying to do here, right? Which is the mission that I'm on, is that I want people to be able to find their voice and to find their experience and their expression through laughing about a really kind of silly and crazy and wild shared experience that we've all had. And part of what I'm trying to do and one of the reasons I'm kind of particularly drawn to comedy, and then I'll get to the family question, is that comedy kind of gives me an opportunity to widen the boundaries of the conversation so that other people can have conversations that they need to in a safe way, right? I think that there are literally thousands of conversations about Mormonism that need to be had by family members and friends all throughout the Mormon worldview, right? We have to start talking to each other, and we have to start talking to each other in a way that is authentic and is really grounded in who we are and is willing to listen to someone else as well, right? And so what I'm trying to do is in addition to just make people laugh, is I want to widen the conversation and to show everyone, look, I'm saying this kind of stuff on stage in front of people. If I'm successful with a Kickstarter I'm launching on my show next week, maybe on a billboard in Utah. So I'm creating all of these big things so that we can start to have conversations, so that you can so it widens it. Then you're talking about me. I can take some of the guff. So anyway, just wanted to kind of build on that, Rebecca, because I just felt like,
well, you accomplished it. You accomplished it that night from what I saw. And I can only imagine it's that way at all of your shows. Just the talking, the dialogue, the humor, the laughter, maybe the tears as you start digging into some of these stories. So yeah, you did it. It was
I
great.
really appreciate that. So my family. So does my family really understand what I'm doing? No. They don't.
There's the answer. There it is. No.
So I have a sister who's left entirely with me, and she gets it, right? And she's like cheering me on. My parents and my siblings, they know what I'm doing, but they haven't really dug that much into it. My dad specifically. So I had kind of an interesting experience. I think I talked a little bit about it at the show that you were at, Rebecca, but I've had sort of this interesting opportunity to reconcile with my dad over the last year or so. It's not that he's a different person, and it's not that I'm a different person, or that we're pretending to be anything other than who we are. It's just that we both have recognized that the relationship of a father and a son is more valuable to us than being right, or having the other person have to think the same thing about our differences. Does that make sense? So like, I've realized for me that it's way more useful for me to have a dad than it is for me to insist that my dad be different than what he is. And he's realized that it's way more valuable for him to have a son than for him to insist that I be different than who I am. And so we've kind of reconciled on that point. And as part of that, I've made a couple of requests of my dad where I've said, Dad, what I need from you, because I'm doing this very new, kind of difficult new work of building a creative career, right? That's challenging work. That's new. I've got to kind of find the ways that it works. And so I'm going to need, Dad, I'm going to need your support, right? I'm going to need to be able, when things aren't going well, right? If I bomb, I need to be able to call you and be like, Dad, I bombed. And for you not to be like, that's a sign from God that you need to repent and come home, right? I need you to say, oh, that sucks. I'll bet that feels bad. Tell me more, right? That's what I need. And so I had that conversation with him about a year ago, and he said, he's like, that's the kind of dad that I want. That's the kind of way that I want to show up for you. So he's aware of what it is. He knows when I did my show on when I did my show in March, I invited him. I was like, you are invited to this show. And he didn't come. And which was fine. And then I invited him to the next one, and I'll invite him to this one. And I don't know if he'll ever come. I really hope that he does, because I think that it would be comedy gold if my dad was in the audience. Oh my gosh, it could be a cool moment too. Anyway, so, but he's aware, right? He knows that I think that Mormonism is made up, and he doesn't think that way at all. In fact, he's dedicated his entire life to something very different, but he recognizes that that's what I think. And he doesn't try to change that. He knows that I am working towards kind of building a comedy career in a space where I'm able to do the things that we've talked about. And he asks me how that's going sometimes, and he offers some advice sometimes, even though I know that it kind of like, it's got to feel a little bit like he's like advising Satan, which he kind of is, because I'm very much an archetypal Satan. In fact, I dressed as Satan at Sunstone when Stephen and I re-met. So that's kind of where things are at with my family, is that I think they're aware, and I think they're tolerating. I think they're kind of like, we always knew that Ben was going to do something crazy. Yeah. So it's this.
Why not this?
Why not this?
It's what an amazing. Actually, I think this is a very invaluable conversation we're having here, because of course I have a large, faithful audience. And probably one thing they all have in common with you is that they have family members that have left. And I think it's really important, fathers out there, what a great way, what a great model to follow that your father's doing.
Yes. And if I could even, or sorry,
no, continue.
If I could, because when you told me that your audience, because I'll be real, I generally speak to an ex-Mormon audience, and usually an angry ex-Mormon audience.
Right.
So this is coming on this show was a little bit of it wasn't a stretch, but it was a good exercise in communication, because I love that we are all here, right? We've got ex-Mos, we've got Momos, which is what I call the people who are in competition to be the most Mormon. Those are the Momos, they believe it. And then there are Nevermos, right? And all of us live here in Utah.
Yep.
And we all need each other. Because I don't know if you guys have looked out the windows in the past couple of years, but it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to take care of each other. And so I was really excited to be able to have like an audience of people who are not my typical audience, because I really want to reach out to you and say, And especially like if there are family relationships that have been impacted because of someone's relationship to Mormonism. And I don't want to make you wrong, because I think that probably you felt that. I think that it's likely that if you are a believing member and you have sort of communicated to a non-believing member of your family that they should come back or repent or do anything like that, I want you to know that even though they might not know it, I know that the reason you're doing that is because you love them. Right? I get it, because I know that that's why my dad does it to me. I know that it's the way that my dad wants to love me. And if I could just offer you some advice, I would say your love is desperately wanted and needed by the people that you want to give it to, right? By your unbelieving family members. They desperately want and need your love right now, but they cannot receive it from you in the ways that you know how to give it. So you believe that one of the ways that you need to show love is to help people be on the right path so that spiritually they're safe and that they are able to be with you in the afterlife. And I know that that's like so important to you, and that it's coming from this place of deep love for this person. But this person is on a very different journey than yours, right? And you can either be in resistance to that, and if you are in resistance to them being on their own journey, they will never be able to connect with you, because you're actually, what you're resisting is who they really are.
Okay. Wow,
So you need to surrender that. You need to let that go, and you need to find a new channel to put your love into so that this person can receive them. And if I can just, again, coming from my Mormon polygamist dad, the thing that he did that worked for me is that he approached me and he said, I want to love you. I want to give you this love, and I want to give it to you in a way that you're able to receive it. What does that look like for you? How could I show up for you as your dad in a way that would let you feel that I love you as much as I do? And I promise you, if you have that conversation with whoever it is that you've been distanced from because of this difference in belief, you can begin to heal that relationship. And it can be something really, really beautiful and supportive for both of you.
So
yeah,
Rebecca,
and if I could just add, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to
say, add to that.
Go
ahead, say what you're going to say, and then I'll
I was going to say we think we're coming into an episode with one thing, and about one thing. Episode it becomes a different thing, which I love.
No, which I love too. And this is such a great opportunity because I podcast in the post-Mormon space. The majority of my guests are post-Mormons, and we call ourselves post-Mormons because we're still Mormons. We try to get that message out. And I will tell you, just to echo what Ben is saying, that everyone we talk to, they all are trying to connect to family and friends. And we spend a lot of our episodes eventually gravitating into, how have you found it works? How have you been able to reach out? Have you been able to salvage that relationship? It is extremely important. So I believe both sides are reaching. And as Ben just said, there has to be a common place. It seems like you and your dad have found it, and that's absolutely wonderful. And so maybe both kinds of people need to look at themselves. And like I said, we talk about this all the time in the post-Mormon space. What works? How can I have a conversation that won't trigger by something I accidentally just say? Both sides need to do that. So I think that's my message too, to echo Ben's. Everyone is trying to reach out, in a way that they can. Everyone wants the same thing. Let's just put everything aside that triggers and makes it not possible to have a conversation, and have that conversation. It's about love. These are your family members. We love you. You love us. Let's just continue that.
Yeah, everyone wants to be in loving connection with the members of their family, right? And if that's going to happen, I'll also maybe add one additional layer to this too, which is that it's not like you magically have a good relationship. What that means is the relationship can begin to heal. And I'll also promise you that you have things in this relationship to heal. And actually, it's funny because I think especially in the post-Mormon world, we spend a lot of time thinking about community, trying to find community, right? We're trying to find the home that we left. And in some ways that's good. I think that we will find that community, but in some ways, the community that we have to find is our own family. And so we have to find ways of connecting. And for me and my dad, that's been sort of taking down being right from the most important thing. So it's more important to us. The relationship that we have is more important than being right about this thing.
You know, and that's the thing though, too. You know, of course, many of you know my story. I was an atheist for like 12 years. I suffered from the PTSD and all this kind of stuff. And, but we also have to remember it's a two-sided conversation. So for those of you who are ex-Mormons, you don't want to hear about them trying to bring you back into the church. They don't want to hear about you bashing the church. The most important thing is to be able to set those things aside, both sides, not try to proselytize the other side, and to both have relational conversations as familial relational conversations, and focus and make that the center of it as well. And so I think both sides can learn from this dialogue that we had today, because I think it's really important. Look, I was angry atheist for a long time, bitter, and I wanted to burn the whole thing down, right? And I get that. And some of you need to be in that space for a while, but don't stay there for too long, because it will eat away at you as well. But we're all at different places in our journey, but it's all about healing, reconciliation, building bridges, and having peace in one's life, and to be able to get past, to move forward in one's life, and then be able to reestablish relationships, which I've been doing with my family and friends that I had basically cut off for like a decade. And so this is all part of this journey that we're all on. I think it's important that we have conversations like this.
Yeah, and to just build on that, Stephen, I think that your family relationships is not the place for you to like purge and feel your anger for Mormonism. Maybe some of it, right? Maybe the parts of it that are relevant to specific family members. But I'm a big fan of rage. I'm a big fan of anger. And I'm also a big fan of channeling that and directing it to the place that it needs to be, right? So for example, I do not hold back when I'm on stage, right? If I think a thing, I will say that thing. One of the bits that I do is making a joke about the LDS Church's essay where they're like, yeah, she was almost 15, right? I'm not going to hold that back, right? Sometimes when I deliver that, I'm a little bit angry, but I don't go to my dad and say, hey, Dad, you need to deal with this thing right now. That would be so rude. That would be such a rude thing for me to do. It would be just as rude as him coming to me and saying, hey, I have this scripture that you really need to hear right now. Right. So both parties, like both groups, we need to learn how to be responsible for our own selves and to take our healing for us, and like to get whatever it is that you need to get out, get it out. Right. There are great ways. You can come over to my house and beat my anger back. Right. Get that out and do that so that you can then go back and build the relationships that you want. Because you actually do want those relationships. You need them, right? Especially for the coming calamities. We are going to need the people around us to take care of us.
That's true. That's very true. Rebecca?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think this is great. Let's get the dialogue started. I think about a friend of mine that received a well-meaning birthday card from their active LDS relative that said, even though you've left the church, still have a happy birthday. You know what I mean? And they thought it's just two different. Yeah, no, yeah. We just laugh. It's like that. What can you say about that? So start the dialogue.
So folks, this is the thing. This is the big announcement here. Okay. So this Friday and Saturday at the West Jordan landing of the what's the name of the comedy club?
Wiseguys. Yeah.
Wiseguys. That's right. Wiseguys.
It's next. It looks like next, right?
It's exactly a week from today.
Which we'll be posting this probably on the Tuesday before. So this Friday and Saturday, August 11th and 12th at 7:30, you will be able to watch the Fresh King Benjamin give his set. And so you can, I'm going to leave a link in the description so you can purchase tickets. I think tickets are $25 a piece.
Tickets are $25. And I would just really advise everyone, if you see this and you think I want to go, you should get tickets right now, because last time they sold out and they turned people away at the door. So you don't want to be the foolish virgins who show up to bridegroom's party with half a thing of oil. Like, come with your oil.
Yeah, and folks, I just want you to look at this. Look, this is legit. Like, look at these big comedians that perform at Wiseguys. So this is like a big deal. It sounds to me like you're up and coming. I do want to ask you a question. So you are obviously your comedy is focused on some of the tragedies in your life. But as you grow, and you would like, I'm assuming you'd like to take this on a national tour. That you would like to do this. Are you going to try to also experiment with comedy that's like not Mormon related?
Oh, absolutely. I'll
Okay.
always, in fact, I'm currently developing a bit about the complexities of how should we say this, of making babies in space.
Okay.
Because there's actually it's actually quite complicated. And I met a dude actually from NASA who is working on the problem. Like, his entire job is to figure out how to help us procreate in space, which I think is a hilarious job. Like,
Comedy gold.
I'm trying to figure out what the issues would be. It seems like with weightlessness, there'd be all kinds of options.
Well, but that's kind of the problem. And then we'll chat a little bit later, because it gets a little bit hairy, and I want to
very curious.
I want to respect the audience here. But to answer kind of the fundamentals of your question, yeah, I aspire, like, I will always be the Mormon polygamist comic, right? That's always going to be my background. That's always going to inform my unique view on the world. But I want to talk about other things, right? So I do want to go on like national tours. I want to have big conversations. And I actually kind of think that in some ways, the world kind of needs a little bit of a Mormon message. I think that the opportunities that we have here in Mormonism to reconcile our differences and to bind our wounds to heal relationships. I mean, you could take ex-Mormon and Mormon and replace that with Republican and Democrat, and suddenly we have a much bigger conversation and a more important conversation.
Well, wow, that's great. Well, let's pull this on the screen one more time, folks. So here's the information to go see the Fresh King Benjamin, August 11th and the 12th. Check it out. I'll have a link in the description there, folks. That's all the information there. You know, Ben, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Yeah, I want to thank you so much for inviting me and just creating this space to bring so many different people. Like, I want to just, you know, for the audience members who maybe don't realize how difficult it is to be able to have a platform and to talk about Mormonism and to appeal to such a very disparate group of people, takes a really special kind of person and culture. And so I just want to like really thank you for doing that, and then for giving me an opportunity to speak to that audience. I hope that it was helpful and useful.
I think it was. What'd you think, Rebecca? I think this was an important conversation today.
An important conversation. And I thought we'd laugh all the way through it, which we did. And then we got to some really good stuff. We've had comedy gold and relationship gold, the two together. It's awesome.
Here on Mormon Book Reviews. Also, of course, MMR meets MBR. I always love these segments that we do together, Rebecca. So check it out. Ben, thanks again for coming on. This is really awesome. For those of you who'd like to financially support the show, don't forget, we do have the merch store, MormonBookReviews.com, where you can get your hot chocolate mugs. There you are, dangling your hot chocolate mug there, Rebecca. We appreciate that. Hats, t-shirts, mouse pads, you name it. It's at MormonBookReviews.com. And those of you who'd also like to financially support us on Venmo, PayPal, as well as Patreon, we'll have links in the description there. And I want to thank all of you for helping me out with the channel. Couldn't have done it without you for this last trip that I did. And all those of you who stepped up and donated, it was really, really awesome. And just remember, the most important thing is this, folks. Remember, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.